have been stable at 16 or 17. So
yeah.
So
So welcome everyone. I'm Julia Fulgham, the Director of Advance at UNM, and thank you for making the time to attend today. We're pleased to have Provost James Holloway and Associate Provost for Faculty Success, Bill Stanley, with us. Senior Vice Provost Barbara Rodriguez sends her regrets and apologies. She had some family issues come up this week that she's dealing with. What is going to happen is we're going to let James and Bill each make a few remarks. Then some of you have sent questions through Advance's Drop Us a Line, and we'll go through those questions, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions in person or through chat. If you have questions we don't get to, please make sure you put them in the chat. We are going to record this, and what we'll do is we'll post questions and answers both on Advance's milestone evaluations page, and we'll work with Bill to get it on the Provost faculty page as well, and we'll let you all know when it's available and send it out. So one way or another, we will make sure all of your questions get answered. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Provost Holloway.
Thank you, Julia, and thanks everyone for coming today. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you taking some time out of what I know are incredibly busy and hectic schedules this fall. And I do want to acknowledge, you're all doing an amazing amount of work in an incredibly trying time. Pretty much everyone I know is doing two jobs. You're doing your regular job, and then you're homeschooling your kids, taking care of people at home, and all of that work that it's kind of unexpected to us today. So I really do appreciate it and acknowledge everything that you're doing. And I want to share a thought that a number of us have shared with a lot of folks this fall. Julia describes it as doing less with less. But I think we do all need to realize and give ourselves some space to and permission to demand a little less of ourselves than we might otherwise do because of what's going on with the pandemic, with the virus, all of the extra demands that puts on us. And besides sort of obvious demands, it puts an emotional toll and a strain on folks, and we have to recognize that. And so, we do what we do because we love it. We love teaching students. We love helping them grow. We love discovering new knowledge, creating new things. And so we should continue to do what we love. But if it's not what we might have hoped to do this term, I think it's okay. And so I do want to say that. We're, in academic affairs, we've spent a fair bit of time over the last, since March, thinking about the ways in which the pandemic is impacting faculty and trying to come up with ways to help ameliorate those to the extent that we can. That's why we did the tenure extension for those who were not yet promoted. We've just, up until December, there's a federal benefit that allows folks who have family obligations, have kids to take care of, loved ones to care for, to take some leave. That ends December 31st, but that's why we've rolled out for next spring a voluntary temporary reduction in FTE, as we call it. It's a horrible kind of long administrative name, but an opportunity for those who need it, who do need to take care of kids because of COVID, or who have loved ones to take care of because of COVID, to take a step away from a class and temporarily reduce their effort at the university. Is just as another example of a way to help manage the current crisis. We also recognize that we're really going to be responding to this for years. Even if the governor is predicting, and I think it's a reasonably realistic kind of prediction, that we'll really be seeing vaccinations sometime in the spring, March, April. That's a time when those will really start to have some impact. COVID will become less of an immediate challenge for our lives. But we also know that in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, however long it is for each of you, when you're going up for promotion, this time will still exist. It will still be part of all of our lives. And so we really are thinking about this for the long term. We know that when folks go up for promotion, we need to remind letter writers, both internally and externally, for example, that, hey, remember 2020 and 2021? That was when COVID happened. And so we're keeping that long game in mind, if you will, because we know we're not done when a vaccine comes out. This will impact us all for a long time. All of you have been promoted to associate professor. Congratulations. That's an amazing accomplishment. It truly is. I remember when that happened for me, and on the one hand, it felt like a world-changing event, and on the other hand, I came in the next day and I felt like I was doing the same thing. So it's it's an interesting moment, but it is a world-changing event because it truly is a huge accomplishment. The genius, the talent, the energy that you put in as assistant professors that was recognized through the awarding of tenure should not be overlooked. So remember that for yourselves as well. You've done an amazing thing. And our goal at UNM is for you to then continue to advance in your career. And why? Because we love teaching students, we love helping them grow and develop, we love creating new knowledge, we love creating new creative works. It's what we all are here for, it's what we live for. It's the way that we individually make huge impacts on the world and the way the institution collectively makes impact on the world. That continued growth and development, it's what makes being at a university kind of fun. Continuing to work with young people who frankly keep all the rest of us young, and challenge our ideas and help us create new ideas, and stimulate new modes of thought and lines of inquiry. And so we want to help you continue to do that, to continue to do that important work, to be promoted to full professors. I hope that's an aspiration you have as well, to go through that career path with us here at UNM. And I do want to say as well, folks are worried about budgets and they're worried about kind of where we are in terms of the future of the university. I came here because I'm an optimist. I think this is an incredibly important place, and I want to help it grow and thrive. And I hope that all of you want to do the same. The short-term challenges at the moment don't daunt me from the long-term goal of continuing to advance UNM as an excellent research university. And the development and growth of our faculty and the movement towards promotion is part of that. We're not doing some of the things that other universities have done. I like to think UNM's a little different. We're not talking about layoffs. We're not talking about furloughs. We're not doing some of the things that even University of Arizona did, to pick on a neighbor, where people are kind of panicking over budgets. We believe we can operate through this difficult time and come out the other side stronger. And with our faculty who are here, strongly positioned to move forward and contribute in their fields, and over time with new faculty coming in as well to help grow the intellectual capital of the institution. So everything moves forward. We will continue to promote people. We will continue to support them in their work because it's what we do, and we're driven by mission. We're not driven by other factors. Mission, the creation of knowledge, the transmission of knowledge, service to the state, that's what we're about. So I'll stop there and see if Bill has anything he wants to add.
Thanks, James. Yeah, well, I want to emphasize congratulations. It is a big kind of milestone or punctuation mark along your career. It is a really good feeling to have tenure. I remember getting it well. There's also a bit of a feeling of, okay, now what? And I think, for me and for many colleagues that I've talked to, some of that comes from, sometimes the years leading up to tenure are ones where maybe a bit more extrinsic motivation creeps in. We're all running on adrenaline, and because of the nature of the tenure decision, that it's sort of up or out, there is some anxiety around it. And when that goes away, I see colleagues need to kind of shift back to the intrinsic motivation that led them to be professors in the first place. Love of learning, interest in your research, love of teaching. And so I think there's a little bit of a phase shift that we all have to go through to kind of focus back on the internal drive that made us interested in this stuff in the first place. I also think there can be a little bit of there's some new opportunities that open up after tenure. I think there can be incentives during the probationary years to play it a little bit safe, to do normal science, to use the Kuhnian term, and focus on projects that you're pretty confident of the timeline and you're pretty confident that you can publish them. And I think one of the things that tenure gives you is an opportunity to take a few more risks, to maybe pursue ideas that you've been thinking about, but that seemed like they were either riskier or maybe required a time commitment that you didn't feel comfortable taking during the years leading up to tenure. So I really encourage you to take advantage of the newfound deeper academic freedom that you have now at this stage in your careers. One of the challenges that brings is that, of course, it coincides with generally higher service expectations. A lot of departments, this isn't universally true, but a lot of departments protect their assistant professors pretty aggressively from service. And you can see your department asking you to take on more service roles, graduate committees, search committees, et cetera. And it's easy in that context for the urgent to crowd out the important. And so I would urge you to, accept a little bit higher service burden. That's appropriate, but also meter it and be prepared to say no. Be strategic about which of the multiple service opportunities that are presented to you avail yourself of, and really think about the 20% nominal service load that's part of our workload policies in the handbook. You really should be 40-40-20, and that's all service, meaning service to the discipline, helping to organize conferences, whatever work you're doing, reviewing for journals and presses and funding agencies. Kind of want to look at all of that stuff and keep it approximately within 20%. Obviously, in any given semester, it may go beyond that, but then you want to try to dial it back in subsequent semesters and try to just maintain that balance. It's not easy to do, but I want you to feel empowered to say no and not feel pressured to take on everything that you are offered an opportunity to do. I want to mention that faculty, because of our kind of rules and norms with respect to diversity on decision-making committees, there can be a tendency for faculty from underrepresented groups to be asked to do more service, more search committees, et cetera. And those of you who are in those categories will need to be, again, empowered to say no to things, so that those roles don't kind of eat all of your time. I think it's realistic to expect that the overall time available for research and scholarship can decline slightly post-promotion. That's just reality. On the other hand, you have more experience, both in managing your research and in managing your teaching. And I think you can expect to be able to maintain your research momentum as long as you kind of, again, meter how much additional service that you take on. A contributing step towards that is to have a research plan with achievable goals, and benchmarks that you think you can stick to, and then proceed to stick with them. You might want to be a little conservative about what you set out for yourself in the first year or two post-promotion, just to kind of see how you adapt to the somewhat changed expectations of you as a tenured faculty member. So those are just some kind of things I wanted to pass on from the experiences of faculty that I've talked to over the years, and I hope that's of some use. So again, congratulations.
Thanks, Bill. And based on the feedback from those of you who were in the September session, we will have some sessions in the spring on managing service loads and expectations, and also developing a semester plan and thinking about how to evaluate your own research or scholarship program and develop a longer-term 5-year plan. So there'll be some short sessions on all these topics coming up this spring. So you were just promoted, but many of you have questions about how to get through the next promotion process. And there was a handful of questions that came in through Drop Us a Line this morning on this topic. So we are going to start with those. And the first question for James is the external review process similar to previous promotion processes? If it's different, how? For example, are reviewers asked to focus on different areas for evaluation than the process you just went through?
So first, let me thank the group for being really planful and looking far into the future, which is a good thing to do. So the external letter writers, the expectations from them are fairly similar. A significant change is that the level of the writers would be expected to change. And so in your promotion from assistant to associate, you may have had a number of letters from associate professors at other institutions. We would expect going from associate to full that we would be seeing letters from senior colleagues in the field who can really speak to kind of national and even international impact of your work. And the focus for the letter writers really doesn't change. We are asking them now to evaluate the candidates for promotion to full. And so they're thinking about a longer body of work, thinking about a longer body of work. They're thinking about the trajectory of that body of work over a longer period of time, thinking about impact over a longer period of time. But the focus isn't so different. We really do ask the external letter writers to give us their views on the impact of your work on the field, and to the extent that it makes sense, the impact of your service work on the field. Letter writers often say something about teaching, but that's not a significant expectation for letter writers. They're not in the same position generally to address that. And so in some sense, the number of letter writers, the things they're asked to focus on don't change. It is recognized that we're now looking at promotion to full, and so they are thinking about that broader impact, that national impact, ideally that international impact, does the trajectory of the work, does the impact of the work align with the standards that one thinks of for going to full. And Bill, you're welcome to jump in anytime if you want to add anything. But I won't call on you every time necessarily.
So related to some things Bill was mentioning, the next question is, what are the cons of promotion from associate professor to full professor? I've heard horror stories about service load, but don't know if they are valid. And I will say my experience in talking to a lot of people and observing is that in general, there's a larger increase in service from assistant to associate than from associate to full. There are certainly some roles that you can only have in some departments if you were a full professor. For example, department chair in many departments. But in general, thinking about service is pretty similar between associate and full in my experience. And I'll let James add on to that.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest con of being promoted from associate professor to full professor, and at that point we really say from associate professor to a professor, is that your title gets shorter. Oh, I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I chuckled with that. Yeah.
That's the problem with Zoom. You never know if anyone thought anything was funny. Honestly, I don't think that there are cons. I think Julia's analysis of the service is correct. All of us have a certain amount of agency in what we say yes to with regard to service. We don't have complete agency. We really do need to do service. The system relies on us to do that. You as an assistant professor had more senior colleagues who were doing work to maintain the academic programs of the department, to support you in your work. Some of it you saw, some of it you didn't see. But really, each of us serves to help the others. And so as each of us moves up in rank and becomes associate, becomes full, I see it as a responsibility to help my colleagues, to help my junior colleagues and my other senior colleagues to be successful in their own work. And that's rewarding in its own way, by the way. I think one thing we should always try and look for when we talk about service is not to view service as drudgery and not to view service as, I really view service as the work that I do to help others. In the same way that my teaching is to help students grow and develop, my work in service is to help my colleagues and my students accomplish their own goals and their own aspirations. I think that's a good thing. But really, as you move from associate to full, the kind of the expectations around service aren't changing. I think for some of us, our own sense of obligation changes. And so I think I probably did more service as a full than I did as an associate. I think the step change from assistant to associate, by the way, was bigger. The step change from assistant to full wasn't big, but then as I became full and wanted to be more supportive of my colleagues, I did more. But to some extent, that was my choice. The expectations hadn't changed. My expectations of myself did change. I think the other important thing to remember about service, and Bill alluded to this, each of us in our careers as academics is expected to do teaching, the transmission of knowledge, research, the creation of knowledge, service, supporting those activities, making them possible. We don't have to do them all exactly in the same balance at every instant. And there were years in my career when I did a lot more teaching than in other years. And there were years I did a lot more service than other years. There were years I did a lot more research than other years. And so keep in mind, and Bill alluded to this, it's sort of the integrated total you're thinking about, not what at this moment, this instant am I doing. At any one instant, what we have to do is manage our effort in a way that allows us to function successfully as human beings, to do our work well. And I think it's as part of that to find joy in our work, to find the rewarding aspects of each of the things we're doing. So do think about service both as an opportunity to find joy in a different way, to recognize the importance of it in a different way, and to recognize that it doesn't have to be the same amount all the time. Right? We're not assembly line workers with so many bolts to put in. We're creative, self-actualized faculty. We get to make a lot of choices about how we spend our time. I do think, and Bill alluded to this as well, when you think about those service obligations as you go from assistant to associate, associate to full, you can pay attention to what are the things in service you would find most meaningful and seek those things out before someone asks you as an obligation to do something else that you may find less rewarding. And so each of us may find different things rewarding. I loved working on curriculum. I volunteered to be curriculum committee chair when I became a full professor because it's something I really enjoyed doing, and it would let me be in a position to make changes in my academic unit that I thought needed to be made and that I sort of wanted to make for a long time. And so think about that as well. You do have some agency in this, not complete agency, because there's a lot of things that just have to be done. But if you're a little proactive about it, you can actually steer what you're doing within your service activity as well. Sorry, long answer to a short question.
The next question's long and you can give a short answer. I'll just say, for me personally, promotion to professor felt orders of magnitude better than getting tenure, and promotion to associate professor. It was extremely freeing in the sense that I literally had this, hey, done worrying what you all want. You know, I'm gonna do some of the stuff you've been giving me a hard time about now.
Julia, we noticed.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but it's true. I mean, the other thing that comes with being a full professor, I mean, we are, for good or ill, we are a hierarchical system. And when you become full professor, sort of the level of autonomy you have goes up some more.
Yeah, I just want to say I really don't see a downside. I agree that it's something that's it feels really good to be promoted to professor, and there really isn't a downside. And I think in some ways you have even more of the kind of choice that James is talking about in terms of kind of directing where you put your service efforts. You have a little bit more leadership role in that sense.
So we've got some linked questions about what happens if my promotion materials go in the same time with someone else in my department and my packet doesn't seem as strong as theirs? Does this hurt my chances? What happens if my packet is stronger than someone else's in the same department? Does that hurt them? How is this factored into decision-making regarding the timing of the submission? And then in chat, we've got a linked question. When going for full, do you only have one shot or can you try more than once? So I think those are all hitting at some similar issues.
Okay, yeah, and happy to take those up. So the first question, which is about kind of multiple people going up at the same time, and you know, I think within that question, there's kind of the implied notion, are we somehow ranking people? And the answer is no. And so we're trying to evaluate candidates against the standards of their discipline and the standards of the department and the institution, and not against each other. So this is not meant or set up to be a competitive process. And you really shouldn't think about timing relative to others in your department. You should go up when you and in consultation with your chair believe that the case is ready to go up. Can you go up more than once? I'm going to defer that one to Bill. I'm going to answer first and then defer it to Bill, because I have only been here a year. At my former institution, the answer is absolutely. You could go up as many times as you wanted. I can't believe that it's different here, but in case I made a mistake, I'm going to let Bill.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a kind of expectation on our handbook of a minimum of 5 years after, you know, before which you're seen as trying to come up early. And so one could come up early, but you need to have a really strong case in such an instance. There was an article written in one of the political science journals a number of years ago, the sort of journal of the profession, that made the argument that basically you should choose to come up for a full professor when distributing your dossier to a number of senior faculty in your field will be reputation enhancing, as in their reaction to your file will be, holy cow, this person has done a lot. And I think that's a really good benchmark. Like when your file is really strong and sending it out to senior colleagues will kind of put before them a lineup of work that's impactful and important and coherent, et cetera. I think that's the time to go up. It is possible if you go up and it doesn't go as you want, it's generally best to, you know, wait a year or two until your record is stronger and until it kind of meets that reputation enhancing threshold, and then give it another shot. Your external reviewers.
And he kind of meant or two.
Yeah. 2 would be better generally because it takes some time to kind of get that added increment. And then, you know, I would say, you know, external reviewers are not looking at your colleagues who might also be coming up at the same year. They're looking at your file and your achievements, and they're going to be commenting on that. So I really think kind of having your head on a swivel and worrying about what other people in the department are doing isn't something you should be considering. I think you should be focusing just on your own work and whether it kind of meets that threshold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, I think just to follow up on that just a little bit, that it's sometimes maybe not appreciated how important the external letters are, right? And so we're looking for 5 or 6 letters from, well, 6 or so letters from really colleagues who themselves have significant accomplishments and reputation at institutions of significant repute. And we really rely on them to give us an independent view of the body of work of a candidate. They can do that in a way that your colleagues in your department can't. Now, your colleagues' perspectives in your department are really important too, but I do want to just, for folks not to forget that the external reputation, the external evaluation of your work is very important. And that's one of the reasons that you want to be out there. You want to be meeting people in your field. You want to be showing them what you're doing, learning about what they're doing. You'd love your ideas to impact what they do. There's nothing more powerful than an external letter that says, so Julia's work changed completely the way I think about X, Y, Z. That's a good letter. And the and the other piece that's really useful in the moment of promotion, people discover you, they discover your work. And so each time I went up for promotion, I remember when I went up for full, the fellow I'd never heard of at Imperial College London, I'd never heard of him. I'm not sure he'd ever heard of me, but they sent my dossier to him to be reviewed, and suddenly he was writing papers based on my work. And so that moment of review is also a moment in which your reputation becomes more widely known. It's a powerful and useful moment. There's a question in the chat about sort of the recommended number of years. And 5-ish years is kind of what we think of. And the faculty handbook says 5-ish. It doesn't say it must be 5. But it suggests that 5 or more is kind of the right kind of timeline. And that's pretty consistent across the United States. And they're going up early does risk you putting in a whole lot of effort and having it not come out successfully. Now, it's not that, sometimes people do go up early and successfully, but you got to really think about that carefully and listen to the advice of senior colleagues about doing it. Listen to your department chair. If they're signaling they're not so sure, take a year. Wait a year, because you don't really want to go through the effort required to put together that dossier, to get external letters and then have it not be successful.
Let me also say, don't wait for your colleagues to tell you you're ready. They're not tracking how long you were an associate professor necessarily. No one has it on their calendar. I'm trying to get department chairs to have it on their calendar, but it's a work in progress. Oh, this is year 5. We should have this talk. You should be talking to your chair all along the way, and be getting advice on what kind of progress you're making, and making a plan, or agreeing that you are making progress. I routinely have women ask me to look at their CVs going, well, I think I need another year or 2. And at least half the time I look at it and go, oh no, you're ready. Because it's been 5 or 6 years. Like, no, what are you waiting for? You're ready. It's hard for us to sometimes tell if we're meeting the bar. So that's something else. Don't wait for someone to tell you you've met it. Have those conversations going on
Totally agree
along
with
the
that.
way.
I totally agree with everything Julia said, including we need to get that on department chairs' calendars. It really
Absolutely.
should be on their calendars. There's a question about who the letters can come from, and in particular, can they come from emeritus faculty? Sure, some of the letters can come from emeritus faculty. We really want to see letters from peer institutions or better, or aspirational peers, and so. No disrespect to some of our other schools, but really, seeing a lot of letters from R2 institutions or from teaching institutions makes me wonder what's going on here. Now, I will never say, oh, there shouldn't be any letters from an R2 institution or a teaching institution. Sometimes they're great scholars and they can contribute something to the evaluation of the work. But the majority of the letters should be from active scholars at R1 institutions that are our peers or our aspirational peers or better. Can a letter come from an emeritus faculty? Absolutely. A couple, probably. What we ask departments to do now is to kind of tell us, well, why this letter writer? And so if there's a tremendously respected colleague who happens to be retired, but really knows what's going on in the field, then hearing from them is great. If there's a tremendously respected colleague who doesn't know what's going on in the field, that's a less useful letter.
And there's also a question about, do we start from 2020 and what is evaluated, or do outside evaluators also look at the things we did since our hire? And the answer is yes, both. The evaluation is really based on what you do as an associate professor, but of course your reputation is based on everything you've done. So it's not like the outside evaluators can or will or should discount what you did, you know, on the path to becoming an associate professor, but the evaluation is really based on what you do as an associate professor, except the reputational piece, of course, you're building all along. So there's one more question on promotion that was submitted this morning, which is the handbook description that says for promotion, the candidate shall also have developed expertise and interest in the general problems of university education and their social implications, and have shown the ability to make constructive judgment and decisions. How do you show evidence of this?
That's a great question, but you know, there are a number of ways, right? And so that partially relates to the ways in which you think about your mentorship of other scholars, of both undergraduate students and graduate students. Most of us come in as professors, we just kind of do it. And we have wonderful organizations like CTL who help us do it, but we're not super reflective about it. But we can become more reflective about it. We can spend time learning about teaching and learning and how it works. And that's evidence of that kind of development. We can mentor and teach other colleagues. One of the most powerful powerful examples of leadership in this area that I've seen in dossiers are from faculty who themselves are teaching other colleagues how to be better teachers, right? And you know, it's an amazing way to broaden your impact. I can teach my own students, and I do that. I can also help others learn how to teach their students better, and the multiplier effect of that is huge. Some people will do a scholarship around teaching and learning. I wouldn't call that an expectation, but it's another way to show that kind of work. And I wanted to bring in an example of, you know, we were talking about service earlier. One thing to always look for among these, you know, service, teaching, research is double or triple dipping. And so when I was associate professor, it's not long after I got promoted associate professor, I led a task force in my college to develop a new first year course that every student was going to take. So that was a big deal. And then I made sure that I was going to be the first person to teach that course. It was actually a programming course. It wasn't, I'm a nuclear engineer, it wasn't nuclear engineering. And then I did research on effectiveness of learning in that course. And gender differences in learning computing. It was kind of this, hey, I got to do service, teaching, and research all from that one activity. And so look for those opportunities to get some twofers or threefers.
That is a great segue to a question on a different topic, and we can come back to these topics as people want to. But a faculty member who can't be here emailed me about the stresses of trying to balance public-facing scholarship and research with more traditional research and scholarship. the public facing or community-based, community-engaged work being viewed as service, but also feeling like they needed to do some of the more conventional types of, UNM and professional service, and that their career was not big enough to manage all of that.
Yeah, and this is not a unique challenge. It's a challenge across the country. And so there's a lot of pieces here I want to unpack, but let me start with kind of my own perspectives. I think that public scholarship is scholarship. I think it's important. What I value in our work as scholars is impact on the field, impact on others' ways of thinking, impact on that set of clients within a piece of practice. So impact is what's critical. The question is frequently, how do you evaluate the impact? How do we know that impact happened? That's where we, for example, rely on external letters. External letters talk to us about impact. And most external letters are written by people who are inside baseball. So they know how to write them so that I can read them and say, yeah, that was impact. The challenge in some public scholarship is finding a way to demonstrate the impact in a way that colleagues appreciate. And that's sort of the second piece I want to unpack. The most important piece of evaluators for tenure and promotion are your colleagues in your department. Right? It's others in your field, and there's external letter writers that feed into them. And so the first thing you've got to do if you're interested in doing public facing scholarship is have some real good conversations with chairs and senior colleagues in your department about how they're going to view and evaluate and want to evaluate this work when the time comes. Right? And that's not a conversation to have when you're putting together a dossier. The time to have that conversation is 5 years before you put together a dossier. You want to start to understand, how does your field currently value that? And make sure you're having the conversations with your colleagues so that when it comes time, one, it's not sort of out of the blue to them. Wait, I'm trying to evaluate this and I don't know how. But you've also had time to figure out, what are they going to need? What do they need in order to evaluate the impact of my scholarship? I would say also then that it's really helpful to talk to others who have done public scholarship, and then at UNM I point to people like Nina Wallerstein, to connect with others doing public scholarship at UNM who can give advice on how they've figured out how to present that. And how to present, there's service is not a bad word, service is not a bad thing, service is a privilege, but not everything should be lumped under service just because we don't traditionally know how to call it scholarship. I think there's a lot of great scholarship that sort of gets shoveled under service because we as faculty haven't thought carefully enough about how to understand it and evaluate it as scholarship. But there are people here who've already walked those lines. I just pick on Nina as an example. And frankly, Monica Kowal in University College, who did a lot of work at UNM, working department by department to help them try and think through how they value community engaged scholarship and civic engagement. So there are people here to talk to. And the last point I'd make is that you also then want to make sure that some of your letter writers, your external letter writers, know this work, know how this work has to be done and how it's evaluated. People like Barbara Israel at the University of Michigan, because those are folks who both understand public scholarship and how you can evaluate it and see its impact, and know how to talk to your colleagues, know how to talk to other faculty who may not do that work. And so making sure that you're identifying across the country who are the other public scholars at really good universities who are gonna, write the letter from Stanford saying, well, that's the best damn piece of public scholarship I've ever seen. That has an impact on us internally. And so those I think are some ideas for how to move to deal with that sort of that evaluative challenge. And Bill wanted to jump in.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the only other thing I would add is I think that there are sometimes more opportunities in public scholarship to then sort of use the experience of the public scholarship as a basis for more academic work and to publish on it. In other words, to do sort of analysis of what's learned from the public service type of scholarship. And I think sometimes faculty see those sort of as very separate things when in fact they can be doing work within their discipline that's based on the public scholarship that they're doing. And to the extent they can do that, that helps to kind of knit the two together and reduce the tension between those two elements of their program.
Double dip. There's a comment about letter writers from outside the United States. Actually, letter writers from outside the United States can be very powerful. They speak to international impact, which is always really good to see. And so I think it can be very field dependent. And so in the sciences, relying on letter writers from across the world is very common. In areas like ethnic studies, say Chicano studies, it's less common to move beyond the United States or perhaps the United States and Latin America. And so that is very discipline specific, but letter writers from outside the United States can in fact be very powerful when they know the field and they know the kind of work that's being evaluated.
The only thing I would add on that is that sometimes international letter writers, I've noticed particularly the reviewers from Europe, there tends to be a bit more of a culture of being expected to say something negative to sort of to confirm the validity. I see some heads nodding. Yeah, it's really expected, you know, that you give you make clear that you're giving a balanced assessment by making some negative observations. I think enough of our faculty here are wise to that they know how to interpret it. But it might, you know, you want to maintain some balance and have some of the generous American reviewers as well. That's just a thought.
And we've got a question about developing more collaborations while not cutting off people and not eliminating people who might otherwise have been useful reviewers.
Yeah, I have not seen this question framed in quite this way before. I mean, I certainly believe that doing collaborative work is incredibly important. It's most of us, well, I mean, there's a lot of research on this. We all get better ideas when we work with other people who are different. And the challenge, of course, becomes then, you know, if I have worked with absolutely everybody in my field, who do I find to write a letter from some distance? That's going to depend a lot on the size of the field and the nature of the collaborations. Yeah, I think it's something to be a little bit thoughtful about, but I would start with what's the good work. And if doing work with, you know, if Julie and I doing work together is going to lead to something phenomenal, then do that first. Do the important intellectual work, and we'll figure out later, you know, that Julia can't write a letter for me and figure someone else out. I think it's more important to do good work than try to be excessively strategic about letter writers. I had no idea as I was going up for a full, I hadn't strategically planned who was going to write letters for me. I had done the work to be visible in my field, to go to conferences, to engage with a lot of people, but I wasn't thinking all the time about, don't want to work with her, she's going to write a letter for me later. I think it's important to do good work. I would start there and not be super sensitive about, you know, am I reducing the pool of people who can write letters? There are a lot of good scholars in the country and in the world.
And if you enjoy working with people, that improves your quality of life. So work
so much.
Ooh, a summary question for you, James.
So what are the key things we're trying to show in promotion to full versus what we need to show promotion associate? So I used the word earlier, I think I used a word like trajectory, right? And so we're always kind of looking at the trajectory. And so you did a body of work to become an assistant, to go from assistant to associate. have you built on that? Have you done something more? Has the impact of your work in some ways grown? The way not to become a full professor is to become an assistant professor and then pretty much stop, or even just do the same thing over and over. And sometimes we see that. It's to grow and develop new intellectual lines of inquiry. I will say that, when I look at someone going up for full, I'm expecting that their impact on their discipline, their impact on the world will have been greater. Because even the ideas that they had as an assistant professor have had more time to go out and become known and to impact the thinking or the work of others. And so part of it is kind of a quantity of impact, going up to full. I mentioned earlier, the notion of, we want to see a national impact, but even better is an international impact. That's one way to think about it, right? And so for an assistant professor, we're less likely to worry about, has anyone outside the United States built on their work? For a full, that's, there's no one thing, there's no set of must-haves, but for a full, seeing international impact is a positive. That's something that moves the case forward. Seeing that there's significant and more impact on the development and mentorship of graduate students. And so when someone's going up for associate, my expectation is they finished a PhD student, or they're maybe about to finish a PhD student. They've just kind of done the first one. When they go up for full, expect to see that mentorship of new scholars at a higher level. I think it would be disappointing for someone to go up for full and they haven't worked with or mentored new scholars beyond what they did as assistant. So I think that's another expectation. It's another way in which you as a scholar are impacting the field. It's in the mentorship of others. And so expect to see more of that, and as kind of a significant impact going for full in your mentorship of others. And an important way is PhD students, but there may be other ways: mentorship of junior colleagues, collaborations with postdocs. And different fields going to have different structures around this, but looking for that mentorship of other colleagues as you go up for full, I think is also a critically important piece that you're not looking for going from assistant to associate.
And keep in mind, you may start a new line of inquiry, but that's not an expectation. You can go deeper or broader or differently in terms of your current area.
Yes.
So, it's you're making progress. And one of the great things is you get to define what that looks like for you. What's going to make this intellectually engaging and interesting for you. So you do not have to spend time going, okay, I need new research. No, that's an option. It's not the only one.
Yeah, totally agree.
Oh, here's a good last question. Any lessons learned from your own sabbaticals?
Okay, so I'm gonna give a very brief answer and then kick it to Bill. I have never taken a sabbatical in my life. I'm not advocating that in the least. It just happens to be the case. So I'll kick that to Bill.
I don't know. I think the main thing, my own experience is each time I have planned too much, I sort of imagine that somehow I will be free to do everything all at once because I won't have all these other things. And first of all, the other things don't really go away. You've still got some connections with your graduate students, and they're still going to be emailing you questions, and there's still going to be work related to particularly your graduate students. I would urge you to be modest in your planning so that you can come out of it with something where you've met your targets, instead of doing what I did one time, which was to plan to write a book. And what I did was the research for the book. And I felt really badly about that for some time. And then I just realized, well, the problem was my plan, not how I spent the sabbatical. So just try to be realistic.
And honestly, there's research that shows a lot of what people do, particularly on their first sabbatical, is recover from getting tenure. And, I'm just going to put that out there and say that. And that's a legitimate use because, you're here. We want you here for the long haul. We want you to create a sustainable, productive career. And what that means looks different for everyone. So yeah, modest sabbatical plan, acknowledging that you've been through a lot. And, and how do any of us plan right now? So, do the best you can, and modest things that will mean something to you and that are things you really can't do when you're balancing everything related to being a faculty member, because you won't be teaching. So, you will have some time for more sustained thought. How can you use that time? It might not be every day, but you'll have some. And what can you do with that can then set you up for continuing to make progress when you come back to sort of the dailiness of being a faculty member.
I just would like to point out that in the chat that in order to make up for me never taking a sabbatical, Jessica took a sabbatical by teaching preschool and 5th grade. Jessica, you win.
Yeah, everyone who had a sabbatical while homeschooling kids, we can but say, we're so sorry. And we appreciate everything you're doing.
What was that?
Sorry, Jess, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you. Something's coming.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for making the time. If you have other questions, you can send them to me, send them to the Drop Us a Line, send them to Bill, and we'll make sure they get incorporated into a Q&A that we'll send back out to you and we'll post. And thanks very much to James and Bill for making the time today.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, one of my missions in life is to make life better for associate professors. So if you run into snags or have further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to find it. So take that seriously, please.
And I'd just like to add, first, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate having some of your time. And thank you, oh my God, for everything you're doing. This is just an incredible term and an incredible time. So thanks for everything you're doing and for doing it so well.
Take care and have a good weekend.